Welcome to this peaceful journey through time as we explore the ancient wonders of the Egyptian pyramids. Let your mind drift as you learn about these magnificent monuments that have stood for thousands of years, silent witnesses to the passage of countless generations. Allow the gentle rhythm of these facts to carry you toward rest as we travel together through the mists of history to a world of pharaohs, monuments, and eternal dreams. The Egyptian pyramids are among the most recognizable structures ever created by human hands. These massive stone monuments dot the landscape along the western bank of the Nile River, their triangular shapes rising from the golden desert sands. At least 138 pyramids have been identified across Egypt, though most people are familiar with only a handful of the most famous examples. Each of these structures tells a story, a tale of ambition, faith, and the human desire to create something that would last forever. The ancient Egyptians built these remarkable structures primarily as tombs for their pharaohs during the Old and Middle Kingdom periods. The pharaohs were considered living gods, intermediaries between the mortal world and the divine realm. When a pharaoh died, the Egyptians believed that a part of his spirit, known as the Ka, remained with his body. The pyramid served as an eternal house for this spirit, a place where the deceased ruler could begin his journey into the afterlife. This was not merely a burial, it was a transformation, a passage from the world of the living to the realm of the gods. The ancient Egyptian understanding of the soul was complex and nuanced. They believed that each person possessed multiple spiritual elements. The Ka was the life force, born with the individual and continuing after death. The Ba was the personality, depicted as a human-headed bird that could leave the tomb during the day but needed to return to the body at night. For the Ba to recognize its body and reunite with it, the physical form had to be preserved through mummification. The pyramid, then, was not just a tomb, but a machine for resurrection, designed to facilitate the pharaoh's transformation into an eternal being. The shape of the pyramid itself held deep symbolic meaning for the ancient Egyptians. Many scholars believe the pyramidal form represented the primordial mound, the first piece of land that emerged from the waters of chaos at the beginning of creation, according to Egyptian mythology. Others suggest the smooth, angled sides symbolize the rays of the sun descending from the heavens to earth, helping to connect the pharaoh with Ra, the powerful sun god. Some researchers have noted that the pyramid shape resembles the spreading rays of light that sometimes appear when the sun breaks through clouds, a phenomenon that would have been familiar to the ancient Egyptians. All Egyptian pyramids were built on the west bank of the Nile River. This location was chosen with great purpose, for the western side was associated with the realm of the dead in Egyptian mythology. Just as the sun set in the west each evening, so too did the Egyptians believe that the souls of the dead traveled westward into the afterlife. The east bank of the Nile, where the sun rose, was the land of the living, while the west bank, where the sun descended, belonged to the dead. This geographical symbolism was central to Egyptian religious thought and influenced the placement of all major funerary monuments. The Nile River itself was the lifeblood of ancient Egypt, providing water, fertile soil, and a highway for transportation. Without the Nile, Egypt would have been nothing but desert, and civilization could not have flourished there. The annual flooding of the river deposited rich black soil on the banks, allowing crops to grow in abundance. This cycle of flooding and fertility was associated with the god Osiris, who died and was resurrected, just as the land seemed to die during the dry season and come back to life when the waters returned. The story of pyramid building in Egypt begins with a single brilliant architect whose innovations would change the course of Egyptian history. His name was Imhotep, and he served as vizier to King Djoser during the Third Dynasty, around 2670 BCE. Imhotep was far more than just an architect. He was also a physician, astronomer, and high priest, and his accomplishments were so great that he was eventually worshipped as a god thousands of years after his death. The Greeks identified him with their god of medicine, Asclepius, recognizing the breadth of his knowledge and contributions. Before Imhotep's revolutionary design, Egyptian rulers were buried in structures called mastabas. These were rectangular tomb buildings with sloping sides and flat roofs, usually made from dried mud bricks. While mastabas served their purpose well enough, they were relatively modest structures that did not fully capture the divine majesty of the pharaohs. The word mastaba comes from the Arabic word for bench, which describes their appearance, low rectangular structures that resembled the benches found outside Egyptian homes. Imhotep had a different vision. He began by constructing a mastaba for King Djoser at the site of Saqqara, near the ancient capital of Memphis. But then he did something no one had done before. He built a second, smaller mastaba on top of the first one. Then he added a third, then a fourth, then a fifth, and finally a sixth. The result was the Step Pyramid of Djoser, the first pyramid ever built in Egypt and the world's oldest monumental structure made of cut stone. This was a revolutionary moment in human history, the first time that architecture reached toward the sky on such a massive scale. The Step Pyramid originally stood approximately 62 meters tall, rising in 6 distinct tiers that resembled a staircase reaching toward the heavens. Some archaeologists believe these steps were intended as a literal stairway for the pharaoh's soul to climb up to join the gods in the sky. The base of the pyramid measured about 109 meters by 121 meters, and the entire structure was originally clad in polished white limestone that would have gleamed brilliantly under the Egyptian sun. Imagine standing before this monument nearly 5,000 years ago, seeing its white surfaces blazing against the blue desert sky, and you begin to understand the awe it must have inspired. The transition from mud brick to cut stone was itself a remarkable achievement. Stone is far more difficult to work with than mud brick, requiring different tools, techniques, and organizational skills. Yet Imhotep and his workers developed methods for quarrying, transporting, and precisely fitting thousands of stone blocks. They hand-carved more than 1,600 decorative niches into the enclosure wall alone, demonstrating a level of craftsmanship that was entirely new in Egyptian architecture. Beneath the Step Pyramid lies a vast underground network of unprecedented size and complexity. More than 400 rooms and galleries wind through the subterranean depths, connected by nearly 6 kilometers of passages. The burial chamber itself was carved from solid granite, and the walls of some corridors were decorated with beautiful blue faience tiles arranged in patterns that mimicked the reed matting used in ordinary Egyptian homes. These tiles, with their subtle blue-green color, represent some of the finest decorative work to survive from the Old Kingdom. The subterranean complex beneath the Step Pyramid also contained 11 vertical shafts, each leading to a burial gallery. These galleries were used to bury members of the royal family, ensuring that the king would be surrounded by his loved ones in the afterlife. In some of these chambers, archaeologists discovered thousands of stone vessels, bowls, jars, and plates carved from various types of stone with exquisite precision. Many bear the names of earlier kings, suggesting they were heirlooms collected over generations. King Djoser was so proud of this revolutionary monument that he broke with tradition and allowed Imhotep's name to be carved on the base of one of his statues. This was an extraordinary honor, for typically only the pharaoh's name appeared on royal monuments. The inscription gives Imhotep's titles, including Overseer of Sculptors and Painters, demonstrating the high regard in which he was held. In later periods, Imhotep became a cultural hero, and his name was invoked for thousands of years after his death. The Step Pyramid complex was not just a tomb, but an entire ceremonial city of the dead. It was surrounded by a massive enclosure wall that measured about 1,645 meters in perimeter and rose to approximately 10 meters in height. This wall was carved with recessed panels called niches, over 1,680 of them in total, creating a decorative pattern that mimicked the facade of the royal palace. Within this wall stood courts, temples, chapels, and ritual buildings, many of which were dummy structures. These solid buildings with carved facades were not meant to function in this world, but were created for the pharaoh's spirit to use in the afterlife. One of the most important features of the complex was the Hebsed court, designed for the celebration of a royal jubilee festival. In life, a pharaoh would celebrate the Hebsed after 30 years of rule and periodically thereafter. The festival involved rituals in which the king demonstrated his physical vigor and was symbolically renewed. By including a Hebsed court in his funerary complex, Djoser ensured that he could celebrate this festival eternally, maintaining his power and vitality forever in the afterlife. The success of Djoser's pyramid inspired subsequent pharaohs to commission their own pyramid tombs, though the path from Step Pyramid to True Pyramid took several generations to complete. Several kings attempted to build their own step pyramids, with varying degrees of success. The unfinished Pyramid of Sekhemkhet at Saqqara shows that not all pyramid projects were completed. Sekhemkhet died before his pyramid could be finished, and the structure was abandoned with only about 70 meters of height achieved. King Sneferu, who founded the 4th dynasty around 2613 BCE, proved to be the most prolific pyramid builder in Egyptian history. He constructed at least 3 major pyramids during his reign, each one teaching the Egyptians valuable lessons about engineering and architecture. The total volume of stone used in Sneferu's pyramids exceeds even that of the Great Pyramid, making him responsible for more pyramid construction than any other pharaoh in Egyptian history. Sneferu's first major project was at Meidum, where he attempted to convert a step pyramid into a true smooth-sided pyramid by filling in the steps with packing stones and covering everything with a limestone casing. Unfortunately, this early experiment was not entirely successful, and much of the outer casing eventually collapsed, leaving the structure we see today with a distinctive tower-like core surrounded by rubble. Some scholars believe this collapse occurred during construction, while others think it happened later, perhaps centuries after the pyramid was completed. Learning from the challenges at Meidum, Sneferu began construction of a new pyramid at Dahshur, about 40 kilometers south of modern Cairo. This pyramid, now known as the Bent Pyramid, stands as one of the most unusual structures from ancient Egypt. The builders began with an ambitious angle of inclination of about 54 degrees, but partway through construction, problems emerged. The steep angle may have caused instability, or perhaps the builders noticed cracks appearing in the internal chambers. Whatever the reason, a dramatic decision was made. About halfway up the structure, the angle of the sides was reduced to approximately 43 degrees. This gives the bent pyramid its distinctive shape, with a steep lower section transitioning abruptly to a gentler upper section. The result looks as though the pyramid is slouching or bending, hence its modern name. The change in angle was probably made as a safety precaution, demonstrating that the ancient builders were willing to adapt their plans when problems arose. The bent pyramid has 2 entrances, an unusual feature that makes it unique among Egyptian pyramids. One entrance is on the north side, as is typical for Egyptian pyramids, while the other is on the west side, considerably higher up. These entrances lead to separate chamber systems, and scholars have long debated why this unusual arrangement was chosen. It may represent a change in the original design, or it may have had some symbolic significance that we do not fully understand. Despite its unusual appearance, the bent pyramid is remarkable for another reason. It retains much of its original polished limestone casing, allowing us to glimpse how all the Egyptian pyramids once appeared. The white stone still clings to much of the surface, demonstrating the smoothness and precision that characterized these ancient constructions in their prime. The casing stones were fitted together with such precision that the joints are barely visible, creating a surface that would have gleamed like glass under the Egyptian sun. Undeterred by the challenges of the bent pyramid, Sneferu immediately began work on another pyramid at Dahshur, located about 1 kilometer to the north. This time, the builders used the safer angle of 43 degrees from the very beginning. The result was Egypt's first successful true pyramid with smooth sides rising to a point. This represents a crucial moment in the evolution of pyramid design, the successful completion of the form that would reach its ultimate expression in the pyramids of Giza. This structure is known as the Red Pyramid because of the rusty reddish hue of its limestone core, which is visible today. Originally, however, it was covered in the same brilliant white Tura limestone as the other pyramids. The Red Pyramid stands approximately 105 meters tall, with a base measuring 220 meters on each side, making it the 3rd largest pyramid in Egypt. Its construction represented a triumph of engineering, proving that the Egyptians had mastered the techniques needed to build true pyramids. The interior of the Red Pyramid contains 3 chambers connected by passages, and visitors today can enter the pyramid and explore these spaces. The entrance passage descends at a 27-degree angle for about 60 meters before reaching a horizontal corridor that leads to the first chamber. This chamber, and a second one above it, Both have corbelled ceilings that rise in 11 steps to a height of about 12 meters. A third chamber, reached by another short passage, was probably the burial chamber, though no sarcophagus or burial equipment has been found. The Red Pyramid contains 3 internal chambers connected by corridors, and it is believed to have been Sneferu's final resting place, though his body has never been found. In 1950, human remains were discovered in one of the passages. An examination suggested they were consistent with 4th dynasty mummification techniques, though positive identification has never been made. Whether these are the remains of Sneferu himself remains unknown. Sneferu's architectural innovations and the lessons learned through his 3 pyramids set the stage for what would become the greatest achievement in Egyptian pyramid building. His son Khufu, who came to the throne around 2589 BCE, would commission the largest and most perfect pyramid ever constructed, the Great Pyramid of Giza. The knowledge accumulated over generations of pyramid building, including the successes and failures at Meidum and Dahshur, enabled Khufu's architects to achieve what their predecessors could only dream of. The Great Pyramid of Khufu is the last surviving wonder of the ancient world, and it remains the oldest of those 7 wonders by approximately 2,000 years. Originally standing at about 146 meters tall, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years, until the construction of Lincoln Cathedral in England around 1311 CE. Even today, it remains one of the largest structures ever built, a testament to human ambition and engineering skill. The statistics of the Great Pyramid are staggering. It is estimated that approximately 3 million stone blocks were used in its construction, with a total weight of about 6 million tons. The average block weighs around 25 tons, though some of the granite beams used in the interior weigh as much as 80 tons. The base of the pyramid covers an area of about 5.3 hectares, roughly the size of 10 football fields, and the sides originally measured approximately 230 meters in length. If the pyramid were dismantled and its stones laid end to end, they would stretch 2/3 of the way around the Earth at the equator. The precision of the Great Pyramid's construction is remarkable even by modern standards. The base is almost perfectly level, with only a variation of about 21 centimeters across its entire length. The sides are aligned to the cardinal directions of north, south, east, and west, with an accuracy of better than 4 minutes of arc. The 4 corners are almost perfect right angles, and the sides are almost exactly equal in length. How the ancient Egyptians achieved such precision without modern surveying equipment remains a subject of ongoing research and debate. The stones used to build the Great Pyramid came from several different sources. The majority of the core blocks were quarried from the Giza Plateau itself, just south of the pyramid site. These local limestone blocks were roughly cut and stacked with generous amounts of gypsum mortar filling the gaps between them. Exploratory drilling has revealed that some blocks contain significant cavities filled with sand, suggesting the builders prioritized speed over perfection for the interior core, which would never be seen. The white limestone for the casing stones was transported from the Chira quarries, located on the eastern bank of the Nile about 10 kilometers southeast of Giza. This Chira limestone was prized for its exceptional quality, fine grain, and brilliant white color. It was quarried from underground tunnels where workers carved large blocks from the bedrock, leaving some stone behind to support the caverns. Scholars estimate that approximately 67,390 cubic meters of fine Chira limestone was quarried for the Great Pyramid alone. The marks left by the copper tools used by the quarry workers can still be seen on some of the remaining stones. The granite used for the interior chambers came from quarries at Aswan, more than 900 kilometers to the south. These granite blocks, some weighing up to 80 tons, were transported down the Nile by boat. The journey must have been a remarkable feat of logistics, requiring careful planning and coordination to move such massive weights across such great distances. The largest granite beams, those that form the ceiling of the king's chamber and the relieving chambers above it, are among the heaviest stones used in any ancient construction. In 2013, a remarkable discovery shed new light on how these building materials were transported. A team of French archaeologists led by Pierre Tollet discovered a cache of papyrus documents at the site of Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast. These documents, now known as the Diary of Merer, were written by an official who supervised a team of workers transporting limestone blocks from Tura to Giza. This is the oldest known papyrus with writing ever found, and it provides an unprecedented glimpse into the daily operations of pyramid construction. The diary describes how Merer and his team of about 40 workers would load their boat with limestone blocks at the quarries, then sail to a harbor near the pyramid site. The journey typically took several days, and the team would make 2 or 3 round trips every 10 days. The boats were loaded at 2 different quarries, Tura North and Tura South, alternating between them so the quarry workers had time to cut and stack new blocks before the boats returned. The diary mentions specific locations, travel times, and operations, offering a vivid glimpse into the daily activities of pyramid construction. Recent geological studies have revealed that an extinct branch of the Nile River once flowed much closer to the Giza Plateau than the modern river does today. This ancient waterway, sometimes called the Aramat Branch, was about half a kilometer wide with a depth of at least 25 meters. It would have allowed boats carrying building materials and workers to dock quite close to the construction site. Sediment core analysis suggests this branch gradually disappeared due to drought and desertification over the following millennia, eventually leaving the pyramid stranded in the desert far from any navigable water. A harbor complex has been identified at the foot of the Giza Plateau, where boats would have unloaded their cargo of stone and other materials. From this harbor, causeways and ramps would have facilitated the movement of blocks to the pyramid construction site. The logistics of receiving, sorting, and moving thousands of stone blocks must have required sophisticated organization and record-keeping. The interior of the Great Pyramid contains 3 known chambers connected by a network of passages. The lowest chamber was cut into the bedrock beneath the pyramid and was left unfinished, perhaps because the original plan was abandoned. This subterranean chamber is roughly carved and appears to have been hastily abandoned, with debris still covering part of the floor. Some researchers have suggested it was intended as the burial chamber before plans changed, while others believe it may have been a decoy to mislead tomb robbers. Above ground level, within the body of the pyramid itself, are 2 additional chambers that have come to be known as the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber, though these names are misleading. Neither chamber was intended for a queen. Arab explorers who first entered the pyramid centuries ago gave them these names based on their own cultural assumptions about burial practices. The true purposes of these chambers continue to be debated by scholars. The Queen's Chamber sits roughly in the center of the pyramid's base. Despite its name, it was never intended for a queen. The chamber measures approximately 75 meters by 523 meters, with a pointed gable ceiling that rises to about 6.2 meters at its peak. A distinctive niche carved into the eastern wall may have once held a statue of the king or served some ritual purpose that we no longer understand. The niche is about 4 or 5 meters tall and originally extended about 1 meter into the wall before being deepened by treasure hunters in later centuries. The floor of the Queen's Chamber is notably rough and unfinished compared to the smooth walls, leading some scholars to suggest the chamber was never completed according to its original design. Others believe the rough floor was intentional, perhaps designed to be covered with a pavement that was never installed. The chamber also contains a small step just before the entrance, which may indicate a change in the floor level planned but never executed. In 1872, British engineer Wayneman Dixon discovered 2 small shafts in the north and south walls of the Queen's Chamber. These shafts were originally sealed and did not penetrate the walls into the chamber, suggesting they were never meant to be visible. Within the shafts, Dixon found several objects, including a ball of diorite stone, a bronze hook of unknown purpose, and a piece of cedar wood. The first 2 objects are now in the British Museum, while the wood was lost for over a century before being rediscovered at the University of Aberdeen in 2020. Radiocarbon dating of the wood suggests it dates to 3341 to 3094 BCE, predating the pyramid's construction and raising questions about its origin. Rising above the Queen's Chamber is one of the most impressive architectural achievements within the pyramid, the Grand Gallery. This ascending corridor stretches approximately 47 meters in length and rises about 6 meters in height. The walls are corbelled, meaning that each course of stone is set slightly inward from the one below, creating a distinctive stepped effect that rises to a narrow ceiling. The result is a cathedral-like space that has awed visitors for centuries, an experience of architectural drama unique among ancient monuments. The Grand Gallery is only about 1 meter wide at floor level, but expands to about 2 meters at the base of the corbelled ceiling. Along both sides run low benches or ramps that add to the width of the walkable space. At regular intervals, niches are cut into these ramps, and their purpose has been much debated. Some scholars believe wooden beams were once fitted into these niches, perhaps to help in positioning the granite plug blocks that were intended to seal the ascending passage after the burial. At the upper end of the Grand Gallery lies the King's Chamber, the heart of the pyramid. This room measures approximately 45 meters by 5.2 meters and stands about 5.8 meters high. Unlike the rest of the pyramid, which was constructed from limestone, the King's Chamber is built entirely of pink granite brought from Aswan. The flat roof is composed of 9 massive granite beams, each weighing approximately 50 tons, which support the enormous weight of the masonry above. The precision with which these beams were cut and placed is a remarkable achievement, considering they had to be transported over 900 kilometers from their quarry. The walls of the King's Chamber are composed of granite blocks fitted together with remarkable precision. The floor is also paved with granite. Despite the immense pressures bearing down from above, the chamber has remained structurally sound for over 4,500 years. The only visible damage is a small crack in one of the ceiling beams near the south wall, which may have occurred during construction or shortly thereafter. Above the ceiling of the King's Chamber, the builders constructed 5 relieving chambers, spaces designed to distribute the weight of the stone above and prevent the ceiling from collapsing. The uppermost of these chambers has a pointed roof that deflects pressure to the sides. Despite the immense weight bearing down on them, only one small crack has developed in the ceiling slabs in the 4,000 years since their construction, a testament to the skill of the ancient engineers. These relieving chambers were not discovered until the 19th century, when explorers blasted their way through the stone to investigate what lay above the King's Chamber. The chambers are rough and unfinished, never intended to be seen. However, they contain some of the most important evidence for the pyramid's original ownership. On the walls and ceiling beams, ancient workmen left graffiti, including cartouches containing the name of Khufu. These marks provide direct evidence that the Great Pyramid was indeed built for Pharaoh Khufu. Within the King's Chamber stands an empty granite sarcophagus, a lidless stone box that once held the mummy of Pharaoh Khufu. The sarcophagus is larger than the entrance passage to the chamber, indicating that it must have been placed in position as the pyramid was being built, before the roof was completed. The body of Khufu has never been found, presumably removed by ancient tomb robbers who plundered the pyramid's treasures long ago. The sarcophagus shows signs of having been forced open, its lid broken and removed at some point in antiquity. The sarcophagus itself is a masterpiece of ancient stonework. Carved from a single block of granite, it was hollowed out using copper saws and abrasive sand, a process that would have taken months of continuous work. The corners are cut with remarkable precision, and the surfaces are smooth to the touch. Some researchers have noted that the interior dimensions seem to follow specific mathematical ratios, though whether this was intentional or coincidental remains debated. Extending from both the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber are narrow shafts that climb diagonally through the body of the pyramid. These passages are quite small, measuring only about 20 centimeters square, and their purpose has been debated for decades. Some scholars believe they were designed as air shafts to provide ventilation during construction, though this seems unlikely given their size and orientation. A more compelling theory suggests these were star shafts, passages designed to point toward important celestial bodies. In the 1960s, researchers Virginia Trimble and Alexander Badoy discovered that one shaft from the King's Chamber seemed to point toward where the pole star would have been during the time of construction. Another shaft pointed in the general direction of the constellation Orion, which the Egyptians associated with the god Osiris. These alignments suggest the shafts may have had religious significance, providing a path for the pharaoh's soul to reach the stars. The shafts from the queen's chamber are particularly mysterious. Unlike those from the king's chamber, they do not reach the outside of the pyramid, but are blocked by small limestone doors deep within the structure. In 1993, a robot called U-P-U-Out-2, designed by German engineer Rudolf Gantenbrink, explored the southern shaft and discovered a small door with 2 copper handles. In 2002, another robot drilled through this door, only to find a second blocking stone behind it. What lies beyond these mysterious blockages remains unknown, one of the Great Pyramid's enduring secrets. The pole stars were known to the ancient Egyptians as the imperishable stars or the indestructibles because they never set below the horizon but circled eternally around the celestial pole. The Egyptians believed their deceased pharaohs would join these eternal stars, and passages in the pyramid texts speak of the king crossing to the side where the imperishable stars dwell. The stars of Orion, meanwhile, were associated with Osiris, the god of the dead, and the Milky Way was seen as a celestial river analogous to the Nile. The Great Pyramid was once crowned with a capstone called a pyramidion, though this has been lost to time. Some scholars believe the pyramidion was covered in gold leaf or electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver. If so, it would have caught the first and last rays of the sun each day, creating a brilliant beacon visible for many miles across the desert landscape. The pyramidion would have been the first part of the pyramid touched by the rising sun and the last to receive its light at sunset, a powerful symbol of the sun god's embrace. In its original state, the entire exterior of the Great Pyramid was covered with highly polished white Tura limestone casing stones. These were fitted together with such precision that a knife blade could not be inserted between them. When new, the pyramid would have gleamed brilliant white under the Egyptian sun, visible from great distances as a dazzling monument to the power of the pharaoh. Ancient visitors described the pyramids as mountains of light, beacons that could be seen from far across the desert. The casing stones were not merely decorative, but were carefully engineered to protect the pyramid's core. Their smooth surfaces would have shed rainwater, preventing moisture from penetrating the inner structure. The tight joints between stones meant that sand and debris could not accumulate on the pyramid's face. The entire outer surface was designed to be maintenance-free, intended to last for eternity. Most of these casing stones were removed over the centuries, particularly during the Middle Ages when they were stripped away for use in building projects in Cairo. A major earthquake in 1303 CE loosened many stones, making their removal easier. Some of the most famous Islamic-era buildings in Cairo, including the Mosque Madrasa of Sultan Hassan, contain limestone that may once have covered the pyramids. The stripping of the casing stones continued for centuries, and by the time European explorers began scientific study of the pyramids, most of the smooth exterior was gone. A few casing stones still remain at the base of the Great Pyramid, and some can also be seen near the summit of the Pyramid of Khufu, the second pyramid at Giza. These surviving stones give us a glimpse of the smooth, polished surface that once characterized all the pyramids. On Khufu's pyramid, enough casing remains near the apex to show how the completed monument would have appeared, a smooth white peak against the desert sky. The ancient Egyptians took various measures to protect the pharaoh's burial from tomb robbers. Contrary to popular imagination, the pyramids did not contain elaborate booby traps like those seen in movies. Instead, protection relied primarily on the sheer mass of stone, the concealment of passages, and the placement of blocking stones. The ascending passage of the Great Pyramid was sealed with 3 massive granite plug blocks, each weighing several tons, which remain in place to this day. The entrance to the pyramid was hidden beneath casing stones, and the true location of passages was not marked in any visible way. False passages and chambers were sometimes used to mislead intruders. Dead-end corridors and concealed doors made navigation difficult for anyone who did not know the correct route. The weight and bulk of blocking stones meant that removing them without proper tools was nearly impossible. The punishment for tomb robbery was severe, including mutilation and death, providing a further deterrent. Despite these protections, virtually all Egyptian pyramids were robbed in antiquity. The Great Pyramid was probably entered within a few centuries of its completion, and all its treasures were removed. When Caliph al-Ma'mun forced his way into the pyramid around 820 CE, he found the passages already open and the burial chamber empty. The granite plug blocks in the ascending passage had been bypassed by robbers who dug a tunnel around them through the softer limestone. Inscriptions from the walls of later tombs describe the contents of tomb robbery trials, revealing that those who violated royal burials faced harsh punishments. One text from the 20th dynasty describes how convicted tomb robbers had their noses and ears cut off before being impaled. Despite such severe penalties, the lure of the treasures buried with the pharaohs proved too great for many to resist. The workforce that built the Great Pyramid has been the subject of much speculation over the centuries. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt around 450 BCE, was told that 100,000 men worked on the pyramid for 3 months each year over a period of 20 years. For many centuries, this account, combined with biblical stories, led people to believe the pyramids were built by slaves. Popular culture reinforced this image, with countless movies depicting whip-cracking overseers driving miserable slaves to build the pharaoh's tomb. Modern archaeological evidence has completely overturned this notion. The pyramids were not built by slaves, but by a workforce of skilled laborers, craftsmen, and seasonal workers who were organized, fed, and housed by the state. This workforce was divided into teams with colorful names that have survived on graffiti found on some of the building blocks. Names like the Green Gang and the Western Gang suggest a sense of camaraderie among the workers. Other team names include Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkora, revealing a sense of pride and even humor among those who participated in these monumental projects. In the 1990s, archaeologists discovered the remains of a workers' village near the Giza pyramids, a site known as Hayt el-Ghurab, or the lost city of the pyramid builders. This sprawling settlement covered more than 7 hectares and provided housing for the thousands of workers involved in construction. The village contained barrack-style dormitories that could house rotating teams of workers, as well as areas for permanent staff who lived with their families. The discovery of this village transformed our understanding of how the pyramids were built and who built them. Excavations at this site revealed that the workers were well fed and cared for. They ate large quantities of beef, mutton, and fish, a diet richer in protein than most ordinary Egyptians enjoyed. Analysis of animal bones from the site shows that prime cuts of meat were provided to the workers, indicating they were valued employees rather than expendable slaves. Massive bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread each day have been uncovered, along with facilities for brewing beer, which was a nutritious staple of the Egyptian diet rather than merely an intoxicant. The village included facilities for copper working, essential for making and repairing tools. Copper chisels, saws, and drill bits wore down quickly when used to cut stone, and a constant supply of new tools was needed to keep the work moving. Smiths at the site would recycle worn tools, melting them down and recasting them into new implements. The marks left by copper tools can still be seen on some of the pyramid stones. Medical care was also available to the workers. Skeletons found in a cemetery near the pyramid site show evidence of healed bone fractures and other injuries consistent with heavy labor. Some individuals show signs of limb amputations that healed successfully, indicating skilled medical intervention. One skeleton even shows evidence of brain surgery, a trepanning operation that the patient survived. The fact that injured workers received treatment and were allowed to heal demonstrates they were valued members of the workforce. The skeletons of workers found in a cemetery near the pyramid site tell us about their lives and the challenges they faced. Many show evidence of healed bone fractures and injuries consistent with heavy labor, suggesting the work was arduous. Some workers had compressed vertebrae, likely from carrying heavy loads. Missing fingers and other signs of trauma indicate the dangerous nature of the work. Yet the presence of healed injuries shows that these workers received care and were not simply discarded when hurt. The fact that these ordinary workers were given proper burials near the pharaoh's tomb demonstrates they were valued members of society, not expendable slaves. Their graves, while modest compared to those of nobility, included offerings of bread and beer for the afterlife. Some workers were buried with small amulets or simple coffins. Being buried near the pharaoh was considered an honor, a way of sharing in his eternal existence. Most scholars now estimate the workforce at any given time was between 20,000 and 30,000 people. A permanent core workforce of about 5,000 skilled workers, including stonemasons, engineers, and administrators, lived at the site year-round with their families. During the flood season, when the Nile's annual inundation made farming impossible, thousands of seasonal laborers would arrive to supplement this permanent staff. These seasonal workers came from villages throughout Egypt, participating in a national project that united the country. Working on the pyramid was considered a form of service to the state, somewhat like a tax paid in labor rather than goods. It was also viewed as a religious duty, for helping to build the pharaoh's eternal home earned spiritual merit. The workers believed that by contributing to the pyramid's construction, they were helping to ensure the continued order of the cosmos and the prosperity of Egypt. The pharaoh was not merely a king but a god, and serving him was an honor and a blessing. The organization of the workforce was remarkably sophisticated. Workers were divided into crews of about 2,000, which were further subdivided into gangs of about 1,000, then into smaller units called files of about 200, and finally into divisions of about 20 workers. Each unit had its own overseers and administrators, creating a hierarchical structure that allowed for efficient coordination of tens of thousands of people. The second pyramid at Giza was built by Khufu's son Khafre, who reigned from approximately 2558 to 2532 BCE. Though slightly smaller than his father's pyramid, Khafre's monument appears larger when viewed from certain angles because it was constructed on higher ground on the plateau. The pyramid originally stood about 143 meters tall, with a base measuring approximately 215 meters on each side. It was designed with a slightly steeper angle than the Great Pyramid, giving it a more pointed appearance. Khafre's pyramid retains a distinctive cap of original casing stones near its apex, giving visitors a clear impression of how all the pyramids once appeared. This remaining section of smooth white limestone makes Khafre's pyramid particularly photogenic and helps it stand out from its neighbors. The preservation of these casing stones may be due to the difficulty of removing them from such a height, or perhaps later quarriers simply ran out of time or resources. The interior of Khafre's pyramid is simpler than that of the Great Pyramid, containing a single burial chamber, one small subsidiary chamber, and two passageways. The burial chamber was cut directly from the bedrock of the plateau and is capped with a gabled roof of limestone beams. Within the chamber, Khafre's granite sarcophagus still sits partially sunk into the floor. Though found empty, like all royal burials at Giza, the sarcophagus provides a sense of the grandeur with which the pharaoh was interred. The Italian explorer Giovanni Belzoni was the first person to enter Khafre's pyramid in modern times, forcing his way in through the original entrance on March 2, 1818. Belzoni had hoped to find an intact burial with treasures rivaling those of legend, but the chamber was empty except for the open sarcophagus with its broken lid lying on the floor. Inside the sarcophagus, Belzoni found only some bones, possibly those of a bull sacrificed as part of the burial ritual. Khafre's pyramid complex included a mortuary temple at the pyramid's base, a causeway connecting it to a valley temple near the Nile floodplain, and subsidiary pyramids for queens. The valley temple, remarkably well preserved, was constructed from massive megalithic blocks of limestone sheathed in polished granite. Inside, more than 50 life-size statues of the king once stood, creating an impressive display of royal power. One of these statues, carved from diorite and showing Khafre seated on his throne with the falcon god Horus behind him, is considered one of the masterpieces of Egyptian sculpture. Perhaps the most famous monument associated with Khafre's complex is the Great Sphinx, the largest monolithic statue in the world. This colossal sculpture depicts a reclining lion with a human head, measuring approximately 73 meters long and 20 meters tall. The Sphinx was carved directly from the bedrock of the Giza Plateau, with some additional blocks added to complete the form. The body consists of soft limestone that erodes easily, while the head is carved from a harder layer that has preserved more of its original features. The identity of the face on the Sphinx has been debated, though most Egyptologists believe it represents Khafre himself. The proximity of the Sphinx to Khufu's Valley Temple and Causeway supports this identification, as does a certain resemblance to Khufu's known statuary. However, some scholars have suggested it may represent Khufu or another pharaoh, and the debate continues. The face has been damaged over the millennia, particularly the nose, which was probably removed in medieval times. The lion was a powerful symbol in ancient Egypt, associated with royalty, the sun, and the horizon. The fusion of the lion's body with the human head of a king created a potent image of divine kingship that would be repeated throughout Egyptian history. The Sphinx may have served as a guardian of the necropolis, watching over the tombs of the pharaohs with eternal vigilance. Its gaze is fixed on the eastern horizon, where the sun rises each morning, connecting it with themes of rebirth and renewal. The Sphinx was originally brightly painted, with traces of red pigment still visible on the face in the 19th century. The headdress was probably striped in blue and gold, and the body may have been painted in various colors as well. Today, the weathered stone gives no hint of this original polychromy, but the monument would have been far more vivid in its prime. Over the millennia, the Sphinx has been buried in sand multiple times. The famous dream stele that stands between its front paws tells the story of Prince Thutmose, who fell asleep in the Sphinx's shadow around 1400 BCE. He dreamed that the Sphinx promised him the throne if he would clear away the sand that engulfed it. Thutmose did so, and eventually became Pharaoh Thutmose IV. This story reveals that even in ancient times, the Sphinx required maintenance and was in danger of being swallowed by the desert. The third and smallest of the main Giza pyramids was built by Menkora, Khufu's son, who reigned from approximately 2532 to 2503 BCE. This pyramid stands only about 65 meters tall with a base of approximately 102 by 105 meters, making it less than half the height of the Great Pyramid and about 1/10 its volume. Despite its smaller size, Menkora's pyramid is notable for its use of granite casing on the lower courses, giving it a distinctive two-tone appearance. Why Menkora's pyramid is so much smaller than those of his father and grandfather remains a mystery. Some scholars suggest there simply was not enough room on the Giza plateau for another massive pyramid. Others speculate that economic conditions or a shorter reign may have limited the resources available for construction. Whatever the reason, the pyramid was still a significant undertaking that required enormous effort and resources. The use of granite, which is much harder to work than limestone, demonstrates that the builders were still committed to quality, even on a reduced scale. Menkora's pyramid complex includes 3 subsidiary pyramids on its south side, likely intended for queens. The mortuary and valley temples were never completed in fine stone, but were finished in mud brick after the king's death, suggesting Menkora died before his complex could be finished. Inside the pyramid, the burial chamber features unique niche decorations not found in the other Giza pyramids and a beautiful vaulted ceiling. The original sarcophagus from Menkora's pyramid was discovered in the 19th century by English explorer Howard Vyse. This beautifully decorated basalt sarcophagus was being shipped to England when the vessel carrying it sank off the coast of Spain near Gibraltar in 1838. It has never been recovered and remains lost somewhere on the Mediterranean seabed, a tantalizing artifact forever beyond our reach. Recent studies using non-destructive imaging techniques have detected anomalies within Menkora's pyramid that may indicate the presence of previously unknown chambers or passages. In 2025, researchers announced the discovery of 2 air-filled voids behind the eastern face of the pyramid, which might represent a second entrance or hidden chambers. These findings demonstrate that even well-studied monuments can still yield surprising discoveries when examined with new technologies. Beyond the 3 main pyramids at Giza, Egypt contains dozens of other pyramid sites, each with its own history and significance. At Saqqara, in addition to the Step Pyramid of Djoser, numerous other pyramids were built during the 5th and 6th dynasties. Many of these later pyramids are smaller and less well constructed than their predecessors, reflecting a decline in royal power and resources over time. Yet they contain some of the most important religious texts from ancient Egypt. Some of the most important developments in Egyptian religious thought can be found in these later pyramids. Beginning with the Pyramid of Unas, the last pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, who ruled around 2375 to 2345 BCE, the interior walls of pyramids began to be inscribed with religious texts. These pyramid texts are the oldest known religious writings in the world, dating to approximately 2400 to 2300 BCE. They represent humanity's earliest attempt to record its beliefs about death, the afterlife, and the relationship between mortals and gods. The pyramid texts consist of spells, prayers, hymns, and ritual instructions designed to protect the pharaoh in the afterlife and ensure his successful journey to join the gods. A total of 759 distinct spells have been identified across all the pyramids where these texts appear, though no single pyramid contains all of them. The Pyramid of Djoser has 228 spells, the oldest and best preserved collection. These texts were carved in vertical columns of hieroglyphs, originally filled with blue or green pigment against the white limestone walls. The ceiling of Djoser's burial chamber was decorated with golden stars on a black background, representing the night sky and the heavenly realm. The effect must have been stunning, the pharaoh lying within a symbolic cosmos, surrounded by texts that would guide him through the dangers of the afterlife. Reading these texts today, we can hear the voice of the ancient Egyptian priests guiding the spirit of the dead king through the underworld. One of the most fascinating sections is known as the Cannibal Hymn, found in the pyramids of Djoser and Teti. This dramatic text describes the pharaoh hunting, slaughtering, and consuming the gods to absorb their divine powers. While shocking to modern sensibilities, this imagery reflects the Egyptian belief that the king needed to incorporate the strength of the gods to successfully navigate his journey to eternal life. The hymn describes the king as a great power, one who feeds on the essence of the gods themselves. The practice of inscribing pyramid texts continued through the 6th dynasty and into the First Intermediate Period. Later, these texts evolved into the coffin texts of the Middle Kingdom and eventually into the famous Book of the Dead, which was used by both royalty and commoners during the New Kingdom and later periods. This evolution represents a democratization of the afterlife, with beliefs once reserved for kings becoming available to all who could afford the necessary rituals. The process of mummification was central to Egyptian beliefs about the afterlife. The Egyptians believed that the Ka, or life force, needed a physical body to return to after death. If the body was destroyed, the spirit would be unable to find its home and would perish. This is why they spent so much effort preserving the dead through mummification, creating eternal bodies that the soul could recognize and inhabit. The mummification process was elaborate and time-consuming, typically taking about 70 days from death to burial. Special priests called embalmers performed the work, combining practical knowledge of anatomy with religious rituals. The brain was removed through the nostrils using hooked instruments, then discarded as the Egyptians did not consider it important. The internal organs, except for the heart, were removed through an incision in the side and preserved separately in special containers called canopic jars. The heart was left in place because the Egyptians believed it was the seat of intelligence and emotion. In the afterlife, the heart would be weighed against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart was light, unweighed by sin, the deceased would be granted eternal life. If it was heavy with wrongdoing, it would be devoured by a monster called Ammit, and the soul would cease to exist. After the organs were removed, the body was dried using natron, a naturally occurring salt found in the Wadi Natron. The body was covered with natron and packed with more natron inside, drawing out all moisture over a period of about 40 days. Once dried, the body was washed, anointed with oils and resins, and wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen bandages. Amulets and prayers were placed among the wrappings to protect the deceased on their journey to the afterlife. The wrapped mummy was then placed in a series of nested coffins, often beautifully decorated with images of the deceased, protective deities, and religious texts. For pharaohs, the outermost container was a stone sarcophagus, sometimes carved from granite or other hard stones. The lid was sealed, and the burial chamber was closed, ideally never to be opened again. The funeral procession was an important ritual in ancient Egypt. The mummy was carried to the tomb on a sledge, accompanied by mourners who wept and threw dust on their heads as signs of grief. Priests performed various ceremonies along the way, including the opening of the mouth ritual, which was believed to restore the deceased senses so they could eat, drink, breathe, and speak in the afterlife. At the tomb, final offerings were made, and the entrance was sealed. The burial was accompanied by vast quantities of grave goods, everything the deceased would need in the afterlife. For a pharaoh, this included furniture, clothing, food, jewelry, weapons, and even boats. Servants were sometimes depicted in paintings or represented by small figurines called ushabtis, which would magically come to life to serve the king in the afterlife. The treasures buried with Tutankhamun, discovered largely intact in 1922, give us some idea of the riches that must have accompanied the Great Pyramid builders. The alignment of the Egyptian pyramids with celestial bodies has fascinated researchers for centuries. The sides of the Great Pyramid are oriented to the cardinal directions with remarkable precision, varying by only a tiny fraction of a degree from true north. How the ancient Egyptians achieved this accuracy without modern instruments remains an impressive achievement that continues to generate scholarly debate. One method they may have used involves observing the stars. By tracking the movement of circumpolar stars, stars that never set but circle the north celestial pole, skilled astronomers could determine the direction of true north. The Egyptians may have used a simple device consisting of a plumb bob and sighting poles to take these measurements, then mark the orientation on the ground before construction began. Another theory suggests they used the shadow of a vertical rod cast by the sun during the equinoxes. The constellation Orion held special significance for the ancient Egyptians, who associated it with Osiris, the god of the dead and resurrection. The 3 stars of Orion's belt were particularly important, and some researchers have noted similarities between their arrangement and the positions of the 3 main pyramids at Giza. This observation led to the Orion correlation theory, which suggests the pyramids were deliberately positioned to mirror the stars. While this theory has captured popular imagination, mainstream Egyptologists have raised significant objections. To make the pyramid positions match the stars, one must invert one or the other, and the offset between the stars has changed due to stellar motion over the millennia. Furthermore, the theory does not account for the many other pyramids in Egypt that do not fit this pattern. The pyramids may have been aligned as they are for practical reasons, such as maximizing visibility from the Nile. What we can say with certainty is that astronomy played an important role in Egyptian religion and architecture. The shafts in the Great Pyramid do point towards significant regions of the sky, and the placement of pyramids on the western horizon, where the sun sets, was intimately connected with beliefs about death and rebirth. The Egyptians observed that during the summer solstice, the sun sets precisely between the pyramids of Khufu and Khafre as viewed from the Great Sphinx, suggesting sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Buried near the Great Pyramid were 2 enormous wooden boats, discovered in sealed pits in 1954 by Egyptian archaeologist Kamel el-Malek. These boats, known as solar barks or solar boats, were part of the extensive grave goods provided for Pharaoh Khufu's use in the afterlife. The discovery was hailed as one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century. The first boat was found disassembled into 1,224 carefully arranged pieces, preserved in a pit that had been sealed with limestone blocks and plaster. The pit was so well sealed that the wood retained the faint scent of cedar even after 4.5 millennia. It took more than a decade to reassemble the boat, requiring the chief restorer Ahmed Youssef Mustafa to study ancient Egyptian shipbuilding techniques, examine boat depictions in tomb paintings, and even observe traditional boat builders along the Nile who still used age-old methods. The reassembled Khufu ship is approximately 4 meters long and 9 meters wide, making it one of the oldest, largest, and best preserved boats from antiquity. It was constructed primarily from Lebanese cedar, a wood that must have been imported from the Eastern Mediterranean, demonstrating the extensive trade networks that existed during the Old Kingdom. The boat also incorporated acacia and other local woods for certain components. What makes the Khufu ship particularly remarkable is that it was built without the use of any nails or metal fasteners. The planks of the hull were precisely cut to fit together like the pieces of a puzzle, then lashed with ropes made of halfa grass. This technique, known as sewn boat construction, was used throughout the ancient Mediterranean world. Despite being nearly 5,000 years old, experts believe the boat could still float today if placed in water. The exact purpose of the solar boats has been debated. Some scholars believe they were actual working vessels used during Khufu's lifetime, perhaps to transport his body to the pyramid for burial. Evidence of wear and water damage supports the idea that the first boat was actually used on the Nile. Others suggest the boats were purely symbolic, intended to allow the pharaoh's spirit to accompany the sun god Ra on his eternal journey across the sky by day and through the underworld by night. The first solar boat was displayed for many years in a specially built museum near the Great Pyramid, before being moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum in 2021. The second boat, discovered in an adjacent pit, remained sealed until 2009 when excavation began. It has since been fully extracted and reassembled, revealing approximately 1,700 wooden pieces. Both boats are now preserved in climate-controlled environments to prevent deterioration. The modern exploration of the Egyptian pyramids began in earnest during the 19th century, when European scholars and adventurers descended upon Egypt in search of antiquities. Some of these early explorers used methods that would be considered destructive and unethical by modern standards, including blasting through stone with gunpowder. Nevertheless, their discoveries laid the foundation for the scientific study of ancient Egypt. Giovanni Battista Belzoni, an Italian strongman turned explorer, was one of the most colorful figures of this era. In 1818, he became the first person to enter Khufu's pyramid in modern times, forcing his way through the entrance after determining its location. Though he found no treasures, his exploration and subsequent publications brought wide attention to the pyramids and inspired further research. Belzoni also discovered the tomb of Seti I in the Valley of the Kings and was responsible for removing many Egyptian artifacts to European museums. Colonel Richard William Howard Vyse, a British Army officer, conducted extensive explorations at Giza in the 1830s. Vyse used gunpowder to blast tunnels through the pyramid's masonry, searching for hidden chambers. Though his methods would be condemned today, Vyse made important discoveries, including the relieving chambers above the king's chamber with their ancient graffiti containing Khufu's name. He also explored the pyramids of Khufu and Menkaure, documenting their interiors in detail. The development of scientific archaeology in the late 19th and early 20th centuries transformed the study of the pyramids. William Flinders Petrie, often called the father of Egyptian archaeology, conducted meticulous surveys of the Giza Plateau and established standards for measurement and documentation that are still used today. Petrie's careful work revealed the precision with which the pyramids were built and raised new questions about ancient Egyptian engineering capabilities. In the 21st century, new technologies have revealed secrets hidden within and beneath the pyramids for thousands of years. Muon tomography, which uses particles from cosmic rays to scan solid structures, detected a large, previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid in 2017. This void, approximately 30 meters long, represents a significant discovery, though its purpose and whether it contains anything remain unknown. The finding demonstrates that even the most studied ancient monuments can still surprise us. Thermal imaging has revealed temperature anomalies in the pyramid stones that may indicate hidden chambers or passages. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped structures beneath the sand around the Sphinx and in other areas of the plateau. In 2023, the Scan Pyramids project announced the discovery of a previously unknown corridor within the Great Pyramid, accessible through a gap in the stones above the main entrance. Each new technology opens possibilities for non-invasive exploration of these ancient monuments. The Grand Egyptian Museum, located near the Giza pyramids, represents a new chapter in presenting Egypt's ancient heritage to the world. This massive new facility, one of the largest archaeological museums ever built, houses over 100,000 artifacts, including the complete treasures of Tutankhamun and the reassembled solar boats of Khufu. The museum provides unprecedented opportunities for visitors to appreciate the context and connections between Egypt's many archaeological wonders. As we near the end of our journey through the world of the Egyptian pyramids, let us reflect on what these monuments represent. They are, first and foremost, tombs, the final resting places of some of history's most powerful rulers. They are also temples, sites of religious devotion where priests once performed daily rituals to sustain the spirits of the dead. The mortuary temples attached to each pyramid were staffed for generations after the king's death, ensuring his ka received the offerings it needed to survive. But the pyramids are also monuments to human ambition and achievement. They represent the organized labor of tens of thousands of workers, the skill of master craftsmen, and the vision of architects who could conceive of buildings on a scale never before attempted. They demonstrate what can be accomplished when a society dedicates its resources to a common purpose, when thousands of individuals work together toward a shared goal. The pyramids have inspired wonder in every generation that has beheld them. From ancient Greek travelers to medieval Arab scholars to modern tourists, people have gazed at these massive structures and marveled at the civilization that created them. They stand as proof that our ancient ancestors were capable of extraordinary feats of engineering and organization, achievements that challenge and inspire us even today. Today, the pyramids continue to yield new discoveries and insights. Each excavation, each scientific study, each application of new technology adds to our understanding of how these monuments were built, what they meant to their creators, and how they functioned within ancient Egyptian society. The pyramids still have secrets to reveal, stories yet to be told. Perhaps future generations will uncover chambers and artifacts we cannot imagine, adding new chapters to this ancient story. For the ancient Egyptians, the pyramids were machines of resurrection, devices designed to transform deceased kings into eternal gods. Though we may not share their beliefs, we can appreciate the profound faith that motivated such monumental efforts. The pyramids represent humanity's oldest surviving attempt to conquer death through architecture, to create something so massive and permanent that it would endure forever. In this, they succeeded beyond their builders' dreams. And in a sense, they have succeeded. Though the mummies are gone and the treasures have been plundered, the pyramids themselves remain. They have outlasted the civilization that built them, the languages that were spoken around them, and the religions that gave them meaning. They have become part of humanity's common heritage, symbols of human achievement that belong to us all. They connect us to our most ancient past and remind us of what we are capable of achieving. As you drift towards sleep, imagine standing in the cool Egyptian night, the stars wheeling overhead just as they did 4,500 years ago. The pyramids rise before you, their massive forms darker than the desert sky, patient sentinels that have watched over this land since before recorded history began. They have seen empires rise and fall, witnessed the coming and going of countless generations, and yet they remain unchanged and unchanging. In the deep silence of the desert night, you can almost feel the presence of those ancient builders, the thousands of men who dedicated years of their lives to creating these monuments. Their names are lost to history, but their work endures. The stones they cut and placed still stand where they put them, a testament to human skill and determination that has outlasted everything else from their time. Their labor connects us to them across the vast gulf of centuries. The pyramids ask nothing of us except that we remember. Remember the ingenuity of the architects who designed them. Remember the labor of the workers who built them. Remember the faith of the pharaohs who believed these structures would carry them to eternal life. In remembering, we keep alive a connection to our most ancient past, a thread that links us to the very beginning of civilization. The desert wind whispers secrets as old as the stones themselves. The sand shifts and settles, covering and uncovering the monuments as it has for millennia. The stars turn in their ancient patterns, the same stars that the Egyptian priests watched from temple rooftops, seeking to understand the movements of the heavens. In this continuity, we find comfort. In this persistence, we find peace. As the night deepens and sleep draws near, let the image of the pyramids fill your mind with peace. They have endured through millennia of change, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through wars and earthquakes and the slow erosion of time. They will be there tomorrow, and for thousands of tomorrows to come, patient monuments to humanity's oldest dreams of immortality. Their presence is a promise that some things do last, that human achievement can transcend the limits of a single lifetime. The stars turn slowly in the heavens, the same stars that guided the ancient Egyptian astronomers. The same Orion rises in the east, the same pole star marks the north, the same moon illuminates the desert just as it did when Khufu's body was carried up the causeway to its final rest. In this continuity, we find comfort. In this persistence, we find peace. The universe carries on its eternal dance, and we are part of it, connected to all who came before and all who will come after. Sleep now, knowing that somewhere in the world the pyramids stand in the darkness, keeping their eternal watch. They will be there when you wake, just as they have been for every waking human for 4,500 years. They are our connection to the deep past, our reminder that human beings have always dreamed of permanence, always sought to create something that would outlast their brief lives. The desert wind whispers across the plateau, stirring the sand that has covered and uncovered these monuments countless times. The stones absorb the coolness of the night, storing it against the heat of tomorrow. And in the darkness, the pyramids dream their ancient dreams, waiting patiently for the dawn, just as they have waited every night since the world was young. They are patient, these monuments. They have learned to wait. Let their patience become your peace. Let their endurance calm your thoughts. Let their silence wrap around you like a blanket as you drift into the gentle darkness of sleep. The pyramids will keep watch while you rest, these oldest of sentinels, these monuments to humanity's eternal hope. They have watched over countless sleepers through the ages, and they will watch over you tonight. Let us linger a while longer in this ancient world, exploring more of the wonders that the pyramid builders created. For the pyramids were not isolated monuments, but were part of vast necropolis complexes that stretched for miles along the desert edge. Understanding this broader context helps us appreciate the full scope of ancient Egyptian achievement. The pyramid fields of the Memphis necropolis extend for nearly 30 kilometers along the western bank of the Nile, from Abu Rawash in the north to Meidum in the south. This vast cemetery served the ancient capital of Memphis for more than 1,000 years, from the earliest dynasties through the end of the Middle Kingdom. Within this area, kings, queens, nobles, and officials were buried in structures ranging from simple pit graves to massive pyramids. Each pyramid complex was designed to be self-sufficient, capable of sustaining the pharaoh's cult for eternity. The mortuary temple attached to the pyramid's east face was where daily offerings were made to the king's spirit. Priests would present bread, beer, meat, and other provisions, ensuring the Khan never went hungry. These offerings were real in the early period, but over time, the Egyptians developed the concept of magical substitution, whereby paintings and models of food could serve the same purpose as actual provisions. The Valley Temple at the edge of the cultivation served as the gateway to the complex. Here the pharaoh's body was received after its journey down the Nile, and here the final preparations for burial were made. These temples were often decorated with statues of the king, allowing visitors to behold his majesty even after death. The Valley Temple of Khufu, with its polished granite pillars and smooth alabaster floor, remains one of the best-preserved structures from the Old Kingdom. Connecting the Valley Temple to the Mortuary Temple was the causeway, a long covered corridor that ascended from the floodplain to the desert plateau. These causeways could be remarkably long, some stretching nearly a kilometer. Their walls were decorated with reliefs showing scenes from the king's life and reign, as well as religious imagery related to the afterlife. The Causeway of Yunus at Saqqara preserves some remarkable scenes, including images of starving people that may depict a famine during his reign. The practice of pyramid building continued throughout Egyptian history, though the scale and quality varied greatly over time. During the Middle Kingdom, around 2055 to 1650 BCE, kings once again built pyramids, though these were generally smaller and constructed with mud brick cores rather than solid stone. The Pyramid of Amenemhat I at Lisht, the Pyramid of Senusret I at Lisht, and the pyramids at Dahshur and Hawara all date from this period. The Middle Kingdom pyramids introduced several innovations, including more complex internal arrangements designed to foil tomb robbers. The Pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara, known to the Greeks as the Labyrinth, had such a confusing internal layout that ancient visitors marveled at its complexity. The Greek historian Herodotus claimed it surpassed even the pyramids in impressiveness, though little remains of it today. During the New Kingdom, from about 1550 to 1070 BCE, pharaohs abandoned pyramid burial in favor of rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings near Thebes. This change reflected both practical concerns about tomb security and religious developments that emphasized the connection between the king and the sun god Ra. The great temples of Karnak and Luxor became the focus of royal building during this period, while the pyramids of Giza and Saqqara became tourist attractions for ancient Egyptians themselves. Yet the pyramid form never entirely disappeared from Egyptian religious architecture. Small pyramidal structures called pyramidions continued to be placed atop tombs and temples. Private individuals built small pyramids over their tombs at Deir el-Medina, the village of the workers who built the royal tombs. And far to the south, in the kingdom of Kush, a full-scale revival of pyramid building began around 700 BCE. The Nubian pyramids of Meroe, Nuri, and El-Kuru represent the largest concentration of pyramids in the world, with over 200 known structures. These pyramids are smaller and steeper than their Egyptian predecessors, with angles of around 70 degrees compared to the 51 degrees of the Great Pyramid. They were built to house the remains of Kushite kings and queens who ruled a powerful kingdom that at times controlled Egypt itself. The Kushite pyramids continued to be built until around 350 CE, making them the last examples of this architectural tradition. By this time, Christianity had begun to spread through the region, and the ancient beliefs that had inspired pyramid building were fading away. Yet even today, the pyramids of Sudan stand as testament to the enduring influence of Egyptian culture far beyond the borders of Egypt itself. The tools and techniques used by the pyramid builders evolved over the centuries, but remained fundamentally simple by modern standards. The primary cutting tool was the copper chisel, which had to be constantly resharpened as it wore against the stone. For softer limestone, copper was adequate, but for harder stones like granite, workers used stone pounders made of dolerite, a very hard igneous rock. These pounders would be used to bash against the granite, gradually pulverizing it into shape. Cutting granite was extraordinarily labor-intensive. A single granite block might take months to free from the quarry and shape into final form. The blocks that form the ceiling of the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, each weighing around 50 tons, represent thousands of man-hours of work. The precision with which these blocks were cut and fitted shows remarkable skill, achieved through patience and persistence rather than sophisticated technology. The Egyptians used copper saws to cut through stone, feeding abrasive sand into the cut to aid the process. Experiments have shown that about an inch of copper was worn away for every 1 to 4 inches of stone cut, requiring constant replacement of saw blades. Drill bits, also made of copper and used with abrasive sand, could create the circular holes seen on many stone vessels and other objects. These simple tools, wielded with tremendous skill, produced some of the finest stonework the ancient world ever created. For moving the massive blocks used in pyramid construction, the Egyptians relied on human muscle power, simple machines like levers and rollers, and careful planning. Sledges carried blocks across the sand, with water poured in front to reduce friction. Teams of workers pulled the sledges with ropes, coordinating their efforts with songs and chants. A wall painting from the tomb of Imhotep shows exactly this process, with a large statue being dragged on a sledge by rows of workers while a man pours water from a jar. The question of how blocks were raised to the upper levels of the pyramids has generated much debate. The most widely accepted theory involves ramps of some kind, though the exact configuration remains uncertain. A straight ramp extending from one face of the pyramid would need to be enormously long to maintain a manageable slope, requiring more material than the pyramid itself. Spiral ramps wrapping around the pyramid, internal ramps within the pyramid's core, and various combinations of these approaches have all been proposed. Whatever method was used, the upper courses of a pyramid required fewer and smaller blocks than the lower courses. As the pyramid rose, the work became more difficult in some ways but easier in others. The workers had less space in which to maneuver, but they also had less material to move. The final placement of the pyramidion at the apex would have been a moment of great celebration, marking the completion of years or decades of work. The ancient Egyptians developed sophisticated mathematical knowledge that they applied to pyramid construction. They understood the relationship between the height and base of a pyramid, expressing it as a ratio called the sect, which represented the horizontal displacement for a given vertical rise. The seat of the Great Pyramid is about 5 palms per cubit of rise, corresponding to the famous angle of approximately 51 degrees 50 minutes. Whether the Egyptians intentionally incorporated mathematical constants like pi or phi into their pyramids remains debated. The ratio of the Great Pyramid's perimeter to its height is remarkably close to 2 times pi, and other mathematical relationships have been noted. However, it is difficult to determine whether these relationships were intentional or are simply artifacts of the chosen proportions. The ancient Egyptians were practical mathematicians, focused on achieving desired results rather than exploring abstract numerical relationships. The pyramids have inspired countless theories about lost knowledge, advanced civilizations, and extraterrestrial intervention. While these ideas make for entertaining speculation, they are not supported by archaeological evidence. The evolution of pyramid design from the Step Pyramid through the experimental structures of Sneferu to the perfection of the Giza pyramids shows a clear learning process, with each generation building on the knowledge of its predecessors. The pyramid builders were not mysterious outsiders, but ordinary Egyptians, as the discovery of the workers' village at Giza clearly demonstrates. They were farmers and craftsmen, bakers and brewers, scribes and supervisors, all working together on a project that united the entire nation. Their achievements are all the more impressive because they accomplished them with simple tools and human labor, without the benefit of wheels, pulleys, or metal stronger than copper. The preservation of the pyramids over so many millennia is itself remarkable. Made of limestone, a rock that slowly dissolves in rainwater, the pyramids have survived because of Egypt's arid climate. The annual rainfall in the Giza area averages only about 25 millimeters, far too little to cause significant erosion. Were the pyramids located in a wetter climate, they would long ago have dissolved into shapeless mounds. Earthquakes have shaken the pyramids over the centuries, and the damage can be seen in shifted stones and cracked masonry. The earthquake of 1303 CE was particularly severe, loosening the casing stones that protected the pyramid's cores and causing damage to monuments throughout Egypt. Yet the pyramid's massive weight and broad bases give them tremendous stability. They have survived shocks that toppled lesser structures and will likely stand for millennia to come. Human activity has posed a greater threat than natural forces. The systematic stripping of casing stones for building material removed the pyramid's protective outer layer, exposing the rougher core blocks beneath. Treasure hunters have tunneled into the pyramids, sometimes using explosives. Visitors have carved their names into the stones, and countless souvenirs have been chipped from the monument's faces. Modern pollution from Cairo's growing metropolitan area has accelerated the weathering of the ancient stones. Conservation efforts in recent decades have aimed to slow this deterioration. Visitor numbers have been limited in sensitive areas, ventilation systems have been installed to reduce moisture damage from human breath, and ongoing monitoring tracks changes in the monument's condition. International cooperation has brought expertise and resources to the task of preserving these irreplaceable treasures for future generations. The Egyptian government has enacted strict laws protecting the pyramids and other ancient monuments. Unauthorized excavation is prohibited, and only approved researchers may conduct work at the sites. These regulations, while sometimes frustrating to eager archaeologists, help ensure that the pyramids are studied carefully and methodically rather than plundered for quick discoveries. As you continue to drift toward sleep, consider how many human lives have been touched by these ancient monuments. For nearly 5,000 years, people have stood in their shadows and wondered. Pharaohs and peasants, conquerors and tourists, scientists and dreamers have all gazed upon the pyramids and felt a connection to something larger than themselves. The pyramids have been drawn and photographed, measured and analyzed, climbed and explored. They have inspired poetry and philosophy, mathematics and mythology. The pyramids remind us that we are part of a story much larger than our individual lives. Human civilization has been building and creating for thousands of years, each generation adding to the achievements of those who came before. The pyramids are among the earliest chapters of this ongoing story, monuments that marked humanity's first steps toward monumental architecture. They set standards that would inspire builders throughout the ancient world and continue to inspire us today. In the presence of the pyramids, time itself seems to slow and stretch. A human lifetime is nothing compared to their age, a brief flicker against their enduring presence. Yet this is not a cause for despair, but for wonder. We are connected to all the generations who have stood where we stand, who have looked upon what we look upon. The pyramids are a bridge across time, linking us to our most distant ancestors, and, perhaps, to descendants who will stand before them thousands of years from now. The night deepens over the desert, and the stars continue their slow wheel across the sky. The air grows cool, and the stones of the pyramids release the heat they absorbed during the day. Somewhere, a night bird calls, its voice echoing across the silent plateau. The Sphinx gazes eastward, waiting for the dawn that always comes, as it has waited every night for more than 4,000 years. In the darkness, the pyramids are not monuments of death, but of endurance, not tombs but triumphs. They are proof that human beings can create works that outlast them, that we can leave marks upon the world that generations yet unborn will see and wonder at. They are gifts from the ancient past to the present and the future, treasures that belong to all humanity. Rest now, knowing that the pyramids stand watch in the darkness. Let their ancient presence bring you peace. Let their enduring strength give you comfort. They have survived everything the millennia could throw at them, and they will survive long after we are gone. In their permanence, we can find rest. In their silence, we can find peace. Rest now, sleep well, and dream of ancient wonders, of golden sands and moonlit stones, of a time when humans first dared to build mountains of their own, reaching toward the stars. Dream of the Nile flowing slowly past, carrying its burden of fertile soil. Dream of workers singing as they hauled great blocks of stone. Dream of priests chanting prayers to gods whose names echo still across the centuries. Dream of pharaohs ascending to the heavens on stairs of stone. Dream, and know that the pyramids stand guard over your dreams, as they have guarded humanity's dreams for 5,000 years. The desert wind whispers its ancient song, and the stars slowly turn. The pyramids endure as they have always endured, as they will always endure. And in their shelter, you may rest, safe and at peace, dreaming of wonders that have no end. The story of the pyramids is ultimately a story about human aspiration. In an age when most people lived in mud brick houses and rarely traveled more than a few miles from their birthplace, the Egyptians conceived of monuments that would reach toward the heavens and last forever. They imagined structures so massive that they would dwarf everything around them, so perfect that they would inspire wonder for millennia to come. And then they built them. Consider what this meant in practical terms. Tens of thousands of people had to be organized, fed, and coordinated over decades of work. Millions of tons of stone had to be quarried, shaped, and transported. Problems had to be solved as they arose, methods had to be developed and refined, and knowledge had to be passed from one generation of workers to the next. All of this was accomplished without computers, without engines, without any of the technologies we consider essential to large-scale construction today. The pyramids teach us that the limits of human achievement are not set by technology alone. Given sufficient motivation, organization, and persistence, human beings can accomplish extraordinary things with the simplest of tools. The pyramids were built with copper and stone, with muscle and determination, with faith and ambition. They prove that we are capable of far more than we sometimes believe. They also remind us of the importance of working together. No individual, however powerful, could have built a pyramid alone. The pyramids required the coordinated efforts of thousands of people over many years. They required a society that could feed and house those workers, that could quarry and transport materials from distant locations, that could maintain records and manage logistics on an enormous scale. The pyramids are monuments not just to the pharaohs who commissioned them, but to the civilization that made them possible. In ancient Egypt, the pyramid was more than a tomb. It was a statement of power, a focus for religious devotion, a symbol of cosmic order, and a source of national pride. Building a pyramid was a way of asserting that Egypt was the greatest civilization on earth, that its kings were gods who would live forever, that its people were capable of achievements no other nation could match. The pyramids expressed a confidence in Egyptian superiority that lasted for thousands of years. Today, we look at the pyramids with different eyes. We see them as historical artifacts, as engineering marvels, as windows into a vanished world. We study them scientifically, measuring and analyzing every aspect of their construction. We preserve them carefully, recognizing them as part of humanity's common heritage. We visit them as tourists, standing in the shadows of monuments that our ancestors built long before recorded history began in most of the world. Yet perhaps we can also learn something deeper from the pyramids. They remind us that human beings have always sought to create lasting works, to leave marks upon the world that will endure beyond our brief lives. They remind us that we are part of a story that began long before we were born and will continue long after we are gone. They connect us to the generations who came before us and to those who will come after. The pyramids also remind us of the fragility of human achievement. The civilization that built them eventually fell, as all civilizations do. The language spoken by the pyramid builders was forgotten for over 1,000 years, until scholars learned to read hieroglyphics again in the 19th century. The religion that gave the pyramids their meaning faded away, replaced by other faiths with different beliefs about death and the afterlife. Everything the ancient Egyptians valued and believed has changed or disappeared. Only the pyramids remain. There is both sadness and comfort in this thought. Sadness, because it reminds us that nothing lasts forever, that even our greatest achievements will eventually be forgotten. Comfort, because it shows us that human works can outlast the civilizations that created them, that something of us can survive even when we ourselves are long gone. The pyramids have outlived the pharaohs, the priests, the workers, and everyone else who ever saw them in their original glory. Perhaps something of what we create and value will outlive us as well. The ancient Egyptians believed in eternal life. They built their pyramids and prepared their mummies because they were convinced that death was not the end, but a transition to another form of existence. They believed that with the proper preparations, the spirit could live forever in a paradise called the Field of Reeds, where the weather was always pleasant, the crops always abundant, and the worries of earthly life left behind. We may not share these specific beliefs, but we share the underlying hope. Human beings have always struggled to come to terms with mortality, to find meaning in the face of death. The pyramids represent one answer to this universal challenge, an answer that said, in effect, we can build something that will last, we can create something that death cannot destroy, we can leave a mark upon the world that time cannot erase. In this sense, the pyramids succeeded beyond their builders' dreams. The pharaohs for whom they were built are long dead, their mummies stolen and their treasures looted. But the pyramids stand, and people still come to wonder at them. The names of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure are known today to millions of people who would otherwise never have heard of these ancient kings. Through their pyramids, they have achieved a kind of immortality after all. As sleep approaches and your thoughts grow soft and dreamy, imagine yourself standing on the Giza plateau in the pale light before dawn. The air is cool and still, and the sky in the east begins to glow with the first hint of sunrise. The pyramids are silhouettes against the brightening sky, their massive forms emerging from the darkness as they have emerged every dawn for nearly 50 centuries. Soon the sun will break the horizon, and its light will touch the pyramid's apex, just as it did when the pyramidion was covered in gold. The light will creep down the face of the monument, revealing the texture of the ancient stones. The desert will begin to warm, and the day will begin, as it has begun every day since these monuments were new. But for now, in this quiet moment before dawn, there is only peace. The stars are fading, and the world is suspended between night and day, between darkness and light, between sleep and waking. It is a liminal moment, a threshold between states, much like the threshold between life and death that the pyramids were built to help the pharaohs cross. The ancient Egyptians called the horizon Akhet, and they associated it with transformation and rebirth. The Pyramid of Khufu was called Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu, because it was where the king would be transformed from mortal to divine, from living ruler to eternal god. Standing before the pyramids at dawn, you can understand why they chose this name. The pyramids do seem to mark a horizon, a boundary between the ordinary world and something greater. Now let go of these thoughts and let sleep claim you. The pyramids will still be there when you wake, as they have always been, as they will always be. They need no one to watch them through the night. They are content to stand alone in the darkness, waiting for the dawn. Rest now, sleep well, and dream of ancient wonders. The night enfolds you gently, and the stars continue their eternal dance above the sleeping world. Somewhere far away, the pyramids stand in the Egyptian darkness, patient and enduring. They have watched over countless sleepers through the ages, and they will watch over countless more. They are monuments to human dreams, and as you dream tonight, you join the long procession of dreamers who have found peace in their shadow. Rest now, sleep well. The pyramids keep watch while you dream. Let the rhythm of centuries lull you to rest. Let the silence of the ancient stones bring you peace. Let the weight of ages settle over you like a warm blanket, comfortable and safe. The pyramids have endured for 5,000 years, and they will endure for 5,000 more. In their endurance, find your rest. In their silence, find your peace. Sleep now, surrounded by the echoes of ancient wonder. Dream of pharaohs and priests, of workers and wizards, of gods and kings. Dream of the Nile flowing gently under the stars, of the desert wind singing across the dunes, of torches flickering in underground passages where ancient treasures lay hidden. Dream of a time when the world was young and humans first dared to build mountains of stone. And when you wake, refreshed and renewed, remember that the pyramids will still be there, waiting. They will be there tomorrow and the day after and for all the days to come. They are the gifts of the ancient past to the present and the future, monuments to human hope that endure across the ages. Rest now, sleep well, and dream of ancient wonders.